This is the official audiobook of the book. To access the ebook version, the link will be in the first pinned comment just below. Click and access. The cup that shapes the water. Picture this: a simple glass of water sits before you on your desk. Clear, still, perfectly conforming to the vessel that holds it. Pour it into a bowl, and it becomes round. Transfer it to a pitcher, and it takes on that narrow, elegant form. The water hasn't lost its essential nature, it remains water, with all its life-giving properties intact. Yet it adapts completely, effortlessly, to whatever contains it. This is your invitation to a different way of being. I've spent decades watching people exhaust themselves fighting against the shape of their days, pushing harder when they should be flowing around obstacles, forcing solutions when patience would serve them better. They move through life like ice, rigid, brittle, eventually cracking under pressure. But there's another way, an ancient wisdom that whispers of water's secret. True strength lies not in hardness, but in fluid adaptation. You've picked up this book because something in you recognizes that the old ways aren't working. Perhaps you're tired of the constant friction, the sense that you're swimming upstream in your own life. Maybe you've noticed how the people who seem most effective, most at peace, have a quality of movement that feels almost effortless, like they've found some hidden current that carries them forward while others struggle against the tide. That current has a name. The ancient Chinese called it the Tao, the Way, and it's been flowing through human experience for thousands of years, waiting for each generation to rediscover its power. The Tao teaches us Wu Wei, the art of acting without forcing, of accomplishing without strain. It's not about becoming passive or weak. Water carved the Grand Canyon, after all. It's about finding the path of least resistance that still gets you where you need to go. It's about learning to sense when to push forward and when to pause, when to be firm and when to yield, when to speak and when to listen. As I write these words, I can hear the gentle sound of rain against my window, each drop following gravity's invitation, finding its way around every obstacle, eventually joining the great circulation that nourishes all life. This is the rhythm I want to share with you, not the harsh percussion of constant effort, but the flowing melody of aligned action. Here's what I promise you: by the time you reach the end of this journey together, you'll know how to reduce the grinding friction in your daily life. You'll make decisions from a place of clarity rather than anxiety. You'll transform the pressure you feel into a flowing force that actually propels you forward. Not through some mystical magic, but through the practical application of principles as reliable as water's tendency to flow downhill. Think of this book as a river system, with you and me traveling from mountain spring to ocean. In these pages, we'll start with the clear, cold water of understanding, getting crystal clear about what you truly want and need. Then we'll learn to navigate around the boulders and fallen trees of daily obstacles, finding the natural path forward. We'll discover how to deepen your capacity, like a river carving its channel wider and stronger over time. Finally, we'll reach the integration of the vast ocean, where all waters meet and become one vast, purposeful flow. But let me be clear about what this isn't. This isn't about becoming a pushover or abandoning your goals. Flowing like water doesn't mean flowing away from responsibility, challenge, or growth. A river has banks, after all, clear boundaries that give it shape and direction. We'll spend considerable time helping you define your own banks, the non-negotiable values and commitments that channel your energy toward what matters most. Nor is this another productivity system dressed up in spiritual language. While you'll certainly become more effective, the deeper transformation is about reducing the internal resistance that makes everything harder than it needs to be. It's about finding that sweet spot where effort meets ease, where your actions feel both purposeful and natural. The beauty of water wisdom is that it applies everywhere, to the way you handle difficult conversations at work, the rhythm you create between activity and rest, how you navigate technology without letting it drown you, even the way you breathe when stress tries to freeze you solid. We'll explore practical micro-rituals that take only 2 to 10 minutes but can shift your entire day from struggle to flow. Throughout our journey, I'll share stories from people who've learned to live more like water, the executive who discovered that loosening control actually improved her team's performance, the parent who found that backing off created more connection with his teenage daughter, the entrepreneur who launched her dream business by following the path of least resistance instead of forcing doors that wouldn't open. Right now, as you read these words, notice your breathing. Feel the air flowing in, pause, flowing out. Your body already knows how to be like water, your blood flows through vessels, your breath moves like gentle waves, your thoughts can stream like a peaceful brook or crash like ocean surf. The wisdom is already within you. We're just going to remember how to trust it, how to work with it, how to let it guide you toward a life of greater ease and deeper effectiveness. Take a moment here to consider, what would change in your life if you could move through your days with half the resistance you currently feel? What would become possible if you could respond to challenges with the fluid intelligence of water finding its way around stones? Close your eyes and imagine yourself 1 month from now, having learned to flow like water through your daily landscape. Picture waking up with a sense of spaciousness rather than overwhelm. See yourself in meetings and conversations, responding from clarity rather than reactivity. Envision the calm confidence that comes from knowing you can adapt to whatever shape the day requires without losing your essential self. Now, let's begin this transformation together. Pour yourself a glass of water, if you'd like, a simple reminder of the journey ahead. And remember, you're not learning to become water. You're learning to become like water while remaining completely, authentically yourself. Moment for reflection. What situations in your life feel most rigid or stuck right now? Where do you sense you might be pushing harder when flowing around might serve you better? Another reflection. Think of a time when something felt effortless and natural to you. What was different about your state of mind or approach in that moment? A gentle practice. For the next 3 breaths, imagine your exhale softening any tension in your body, like warm water flowing through tight spaces and helping them relax. Let each breath teach your system what it feels like to yield without losing strength. Who you are and what you're struggling with. I see you there, friend. Perhaps you're reading this on your phone between meetings, or listening while commuting through traffic that moves like honey in winter. Maybe it's late at night, the glow of screens still burning behind your tired eyes, and you've found yourself searching for something you can't quite name, something that promises less friction, more flow. You are not broken. You are not failing at life. You are simply trying to be water in containers that were designed for something else entirely. Let me paint a picture of who I sense you are. You might be the professional whose calendar looks like a game of Tetris played by someone having a seizure, back-to-back meetings that leave no space to breathe, let alone think. Your inbox multiplies like rabbits while you sleep, and by the time you've cleared it, 17 new urgent matters have sprouted like mushrooms after rain. You've become skilled at switching between video calls, muting yourself to take other calls, smiling while your nervous system hums with the low-grade electricity of constant alertness. The modern workplace has become a rapids where everyone pretends they're built for white water, but your soul keeps whispering about still pools and gentle currents. You've learned to speak in acronyms and metrics, to move with the velocity that technology demands, yet something in you remembers a different rhythm, one that breathes. Or perhaps you're the perfectionist who has confused control with safety. You've built elaborate systems to manage every variable, color-coded calendars that would make a rainbow jealous, and contingency plans for your contingency plans. You know exactly how long each task should take, and you've optimized your productivity to what you believe is peak efficiency. Yet exhaustion follows you like a faithful dog, and the thought of letting go feels like stepping off a cliff blindfolded. I understand this intimately. The perfectionist believes that if they can just control enough variables, arrange enough details, anticipate enough problems, they can create a life without turbulence. But this is like trying to straighten a river with concrete. It might work for a while, but the water will always find a way to remind you of its nature. And when it does, the flood is often more devastating than if you had simply learned to work with the curves. You might be what I call the sensitive seeker, someone who feels the emotional weather of every room you enter, who absorbs the stress of colleagues like a sponge absorbs water. You have a gift for sensing what others need, but somewhere along the way you forgot to tend to your own ecosystem. You've become everyone's emotional support system while your own roots grow parched. You feel deeply but express carefully, afraid that your intensity might be too much for others. You've learned to modulate your voice in meetings, to package your insights in acceptable formats, to make yourself smaller so others feel more comfortable. Yet this compression creates its own turbulence, like a river forced into too narrow a channel, the pressure builds. Perhaps you recognize yourself in the cycles I see so often: bursts of intense productivity followed by complete depletion. You sprint until you collapse, then judge yourself for needing rest. You compare your behind-the-scenes struggle with others' highlight reels, forgetting that everyone is fighting battles you cannot see. The nights are often the hardest, aren't they? When the day's momentum finally stops, and your mind begins to process all the stimulation it absorbed. Sleep feels like a luxury you can't afford, even though you know you need it desperately. Your thoughts circle like water down a drain, rehearsing tomorrow's challenges or replaying today's awkward moments. You've probably tried various solutions. Maybe you've downloaded meditation apps that gather digital dust, started morning routines that lasted exactly 3 days, or bought books about work-life balance that now serve as expensive bookends. You've attended webinars about stress management while simultaneously checking your email, embracing the very behavior you hope to change. Here's what I've observed after decades of watching humans try to force themselves into shapes that don't fit their nature: we've been solving the wrong problem. We keep trying to make ourselves more efficient, more resilient, more capable of handling the rapids. But what if the answer isn't to become a better swimmer in turbulent waters, but to understand the nature of water itself? The anxiety you feel, the overwhelm that visits like an unwelcome guest, the sense that you're always one step behind, these aren't character flaws. They're symptoms of trying to live like a solid thing in a liquid world. You've been taught to be a rock when your nature is to flow. From a Taoist perspective, your struggles have a different shape than our culture suggests. We're told that stress comes from having too much to do, but I've noticed that the most peaceful people I know often carry tremendous responsibilities. The difference isn't in what they carry, but in how they carry it. They've learned to be like a riverbed, providing structure and direction without fighting the current. Your perfectionism isn't really about high standards, it's about fear of the unpredictable. But life, like water, is fundamentally unpredictable. The perfectionist tries to create certainty in an uncertain world, which is like trying to hold a river in cupped hands. The water doesn't stay because you squeeze harder, it stays because you create the right conditions for it to want to remain. Your sensitivity isn't a weakness, it's a sophisticated navigation system. But like any sensitive instrument, it needs proper calibration. You've been using your emotional radar in environments with too much noise, like trying to stargaze in Times Square. The solution isn't to dull your sensitivity, but to create better conditions for it to serve you. The exhaustion you feel often comes not from working too hard, but from working against your grain. You've been swimming upstream when you could have been riding the current. You've been forcing doors that were meant to swing on different hinges. I want you to imagine, for a moment, what it might feel like to work with your nature instead of against it. To make decisions from clarity rather than anxiety. To respond to challenges like water responds to obstacles, not by crashing against them, but by finding the path of least resistance that still reaches the sea. This doesn't mean becoming passive or abandoning your ambitions. Water carved the Grand Canyon, after all. It means learning to apply your energy with the precision of a stream that knows exactly where it's going, even when it takes the long way around. As we continue this journey together, I'll show you how to recognize when you're trying to flow uphill, and how to redirect your efforts in ways that feel both natural and effective. You'll learn to distinguish between productive action and anxious motion, between healthy boundaries and rigid walls. The path ahead isn't about adding more techniques to your already full toolkit. It's about subtracting, removing the obstacles you've unknowingly placed in your own current. It's about remembering something you once knew but forgot in the noise of modern life, that effectiveness comes not from force, but from alignment. Moments for reflection. Think of a recent moment when you felt you were forcing something that didn't want to happen. What was your body telling you at the time? Now recall a time when an action felt effortless and natural. What conditions were present that allowed that ease? How might your current struggles be invitations to find a different path rather than problems to solve through more effort? Practice. For the next 3 days, notice when you catch yourself using force, physical, mental, or emotional. Don't try to change anything yet, simply observe. When you notice forcing, take one conscious breath and ask yourself, what would the path of less resistance look like here? You don't need to act on the answer, Just let yourself become curious about alternatives to the way you've been approaching things. The river that will carry you forward is already flowing within you. You just need to remember how to recognize its current. Foundations. Water knows no philosophy, yet it embodies all wisdom. It never argues with gravity, never questions the shape of its container, never resists the pull toward the sea. In this simplicity lies a teaching more profound than any doctrine I could offer you. I invite you to imagine yourself standing by a mountain spring on an early morning. The air carries the scent of pine and damp earth. You can hear the gentle murmur of water finding its way between smooth stones, each drop joining the next in an unbroken song of becoming. This is where we begin our understanding of the Tao, not in complexity, but in the immediate, living presence of what simply is. The word Tao itself means the way, but not a path carved by human hands. Rather, it's the natural order that flows through all existence, the invisible current that guides planets in their orbits, seasons in their turning, and breath in its rhythm through your body at this very moment. When I speak of the Tao, I'm not offering you another belief system to adopt or reject. I'm pointing towards something you already know intimately, something your heart recognizes even when your mind cannot name it. You've felt the Tao in those moments when everything seems to align effortlessly, when the right words come without forcing, when solutions emerge from stillness, when you find yourself exactly where you need to be without having planned it. These aren't accidents or coincidences. They're glimpses of your natural state, like a river remembering its course after winter's ice melts away. The foundation of water like living rests on 5 principles that work together like tributaries feeding a single stream. Each one is simple to understand, profound to embody, and immediately practical in your daily life. Let me walk with you through each one, not as abstract concepts, but as living realities you can taste and touch. The Tao, navigating rather than dominating. The Tao is the unnamed source from which all things flow and to which they return. Think of it as the intelligence that teaches birds to migrate, flowers to bloom at their perfect moment, and your own heart to beat without your conscious effort. This intelligence doesn't force or hurry. It doesn't worry about outcomes. It simply moves with a precision that makes our most sophisticated planning seem clumsy by comparison. In your professional life, you've likely experienced the difference between swimming against the current and moving with it. When you try to force a creative breakthrough during your naturally low energy hours, you exhaust yourself with minimal results. But when you align your most demanding work with your natural rhythms, writing in the morning if that's when your mind is clearest, scheduling important conversations when your patience runs deepest, you accomplish more with less strain. This doesn't mean becoming passive or abandoning your goals. A skilled sailor doesn't surrender to the wind, they work with it, adjusting their sails to harness its power. Similarly, working with the Tao means becoming exquisitely sensitive to the natural currents of your life, the rhythms of your energy, the patterns of your relationships, the cycles of expansion and contraction that govern all growth. Last month, I watched a friend struggle with a career transition. For weeks, he pushed himself to make decisions, forcing clarity where confusion naturally existed. His anxiety grew with each forced step. Then one evening, while washing dishes, not thinking about his career at all, the answer came with such obvious simplicity that he laughed aloud. This is the Tao revealing itself through stillness, through the pauses between our efforts. Wu Wei, acting in natural timing. Wu Wei literally translates as non-doing, but this creates confusion for the Western mind that equates non-doing with inaction. Wu Wei is not the absence of action, it's the presence of perfectly timed action. It's the difference between the exhausting effort of swimming upstream and the powerful efficiency of surfing a wave. Picture a master chef preparing a complex meal. Their movements appear effortless, almost dance-like, yet every gesture serves a purpose. They don't rush the onions or force the sauce. They act when action is needed and wait when waiting serves. This is Wu Wei in practice, not laziness, but a refined sensitivity to the moment when effort becomes most effective. In your daily work, Wu Wei might look like pausing before responding to a challenging email, allowing wisdom to emerge rather than reacting from frustration. It might mean recognizing when a team meeting has reached natural completion, even if the scheduled hour hasn't elapsed. It might mean starting that difficult conversation when you sense your partner's heart is open, rather than when your schedule demands it. I remember counseling a young entrepreneur who was burning himself out with 18-hour days, convinced that more effort would yield better results. His business was stagnating despite his heroic activity. We spent an afternoon by a river, watching the water work its way around obstacles. See how the water never hurries, yet arrives precisely on time? I asked him. Over the following months, he learned to distinguish between productive action and anxious busyness. His work hours decreased while his results improved, not through magic, but through alignment with natural principles of effort and rest. Wu Wei requires developing what I call exquisite timing, the ability to sense when conditions are ripe for action and when they require patience. This sensitivity grows through practice, like learning to feel the precise moment when bread dough has risen enough, or when a friendship is ready for deeper honesty. Yin and Yang, the wisdom of alternation. The symbol of yin and yang is everywhere in modern culture, often reduced to simple opposites, light and dark, male and female, good and evil. But this ancient teaching contains subtleties that can transform how you approach the rhythm of your days. Yin and yang are not opposing forces locked in battle, but complementary aspects of one flowing reality. Watch the tide. As it withdraws, it's not being defeated by the shore, it's gathering strength for its return. Your energy follows similar patterns. Your most productive periods naturally give way to times of reflection and renewal. Your seasons of expansion alternate with seasons of deepening. In our culture's obsession with constant growth and endless availability, we often try to live in perpetual yang, always producing, always on, always moving forward. This is like trying to breathe only in, never out. The result is exhaustion, anxiety, and a peculiar sense of being disconnected from our own natural intelligence. Consider how you structure your weeks. Do you honor your natural rhythm of expansion and contraction, or do you try to maintain the same energy level from Monday through Sunday? A water-like approach might involve scheduling your most demanding creative work during your personal high-tide hours while protecting your low-tide times for reflection, planning, or simple rest. I've learned to recognize my own patterns: mornings for writing when my mind moves like a clear mountain stream, afternoons for meetings when my energy has the warmth of sun on stone, evenings for contemplation when thoughts naturally settle like sediment in still water. This isn't rigid scheduling, it's respectful collaboration with my own nature. The wisdom of yin and yang also applies to your relationships. There are seasons for deep sharing and seasons for comfortable silence, moments that call for direct action and moments that require patient witnessing. A relationship that honors both aspects flows like a healthy river, sometimes swift and playful, sometimes deep and still, always moving toward greater intimacy. Ziren, the art of natural authenticity. Ziren means spontaneous or natural, but not in the sense of impulsive behavior. Rather, it refers to the authenticity that emerges when you stop performing and start responding from your genuine nature. It's the opposite of the exhausting effort of trying to be someone you're not. You've experienced Ziren in conversations that flow so naturally you forget to be self-conscious, in work that feels more like play, in moments when your response to a situation feels perfectly fitting without planning or rehearsal. This is an accident, it's your true nature expressing itself when the obstacles of overthinking and second-guessing are temporarily cleared away. Most of us carry layers of learned behavior, professional personas, family roles, social masks, that serve important purposes but can become rigid over time. Ziren invites you to hold these roles lightly, like clothing you put on when appropriate but don't confuse with your essential self. Underneath all the roles lives your water nature, responsive, clear, adaptable, powerful. Practicing Ziren doesn't mean abandoning consideration for others or professional appropriateness. Rather, it means finding the most natural way to meet each situation. Instead of forcing yourself into a predetermined response pattern, you learn to trust that your authentic reaction, informed by wisdom and tempered by kindness, will serve better than any performance. I once worked with a manager who was exhausting herself trying to be the kind of leader she thought she should be, always confident, always decisive, always inspiring. Her team felt disconnected from her because they sensed the performance. Through practicing Ziren, she learned to lead from her actual strengths: thoughtful listening, genuine care for her people, and the ability to admit uncertainty while maintaining clear direction. Her leadership became more effective precisely as it became more natural. The influence of quiet presence. Is perhaps the most subtle of these foundations, yet it may be the most practical for your daily life. Often translated as virtue or moral power, actually refers to the natural influence that flows from authentic being. It's the quiet authority of someone who has found their center, the magnetic quality of genuine presence. You recognize when you encounter it. It's the teacher who never raises their voice yet commands immediate attention, the friend whose calm presence helps you find your own clarity, the colleague whose integrity is so evident that it elevates everyone around them. Is not something you develop for its effect on others, that would make it manipulation. Rather, it's the natural fragrance of a life lived in alignment with deeper principles. Accumulates through countless small choices, responding rather than reacting, listening more deeply than you speak, keeping commitments to yourself as faithfully as those you make to others. It grows through what you don't do as much as what you do, the harsh word you don't speak, the gossip you don't spread, the shortcuts you don't take. Unlike charisma or charm, that doesn't need to be turned on or performed. It simply is, like the steady presence of an old tree or the reliable flow of a healthy spring. This quality becomes particularly valuable in leadership situations, challenging conversations, and moments when others look to you for stability. I think of a doctor I once knew who had this quality of patients felt calmer in her presence not because she said reassuring things, though her words were wise, but because something in her being communicated safety and competence. She had learned to be fully present with suffering without being overwhelmed by it, to offer hope without false promises, to maintain professional boundaries while radiating genuine care. The river as living metaphor. These 5 principles, Tao, Wu Wei, Yin and Yang, Ziren, and Da, work together like the elements of a healthy river system. The riverbed represents your core values and non-negotiable boundaries. The water itself is your daily actions and responses, always moving yet always true to the contours that guide it. The banks are your context, your relationships, work environment, physical health, which both shape and are shaped by your flow. When all elements are in harmony, your life has the quality of a healthy river, purposeful yet relaxed, powerful yet gentle, responsive to conditions yet faithful to its essential direction. There's no wasted motion, no fighting against reality, no exhaustion from swimming upstream. This doesn't mean your life becomes passive or without challenge. Rivers carve through mountains, but they do so with patient persistence rather than violent force. They find the path of least resistance while remaining absolutely committed to their destination. They work with gravity rather than against it, using the Earth's own energy to accomplish their purpose. As you begin to embody these principles, you might notice that your decision-making becomes clearer, your relationships more harmonious, your work more effective with less strain. This isn't because you've adopted new techniques, but because you've remembered your water nature, the part of you that already knows how to flow, how to adapt, how to find the way forward with minimal friction. Reflection and practice. As we conclude this foundation, I invite you to pause and consider, which of these principles feels most foreign to your current way of living? Which one calls to you with the strongest recognition? Notice without judgment, this awareness itself is the beginning of change. Take a moment to reflect on a recent situation where you felt you were swimming upstream, working hard but getting nowhere, forcing solutions that wouldn't stick, feeling exhausted by your own efforts. Now imagine approaching that same situation from each of these principles. What would Wu Wei look like in that context? How might honoring Yin and Yang have changed your approach? What would Ziren have offered? Consider also a time when you felt truly in flow, when actions emerged effortlessly, when timing seemed perfect, when you felt connected to something larger than your individual will. What conditions supported that experience? How might you create more of those conditions in your regular life? For your first practical experiment, I suggest this simple practice. Once each day for the next week, when you notice yourself forcing or pushing against resistance, pause and ask, how might water approach this situation? Don't force yourself to find an answer, simply hold the question with curiosity and notice what emerges. You might be surprised by the wisdom that surfaces when you stop trying so hard to manufacture solutions. Remember, these foundations are not theories to understand but realities to embody. Like water itself, they reveal their secrets not to analysis but to patient, gentle practice. Trust the process, trust your own water nature, and trust that the path will become clear as you walk it. Key principles applied to daily life. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a mountain stream, watching how water navigates the landscape before it. The water doesn't pause to strategize or force its way through, it simply responds to what's present. Where it meets a boulder, it curves around. Where the ground slopes, it follows. Where it encounters a narrow passage, it deepens rather than fights. This is not passivity, this is intelligence in motion. In our modern world, we've been taught to approach life like a jackhammer, breaking through obstacles with sheer force, pushing harder when things don't yield, believing that struggle equals progress. But I invite you to consider another way, one that your ancestors understood long before the age of endless notifications and productivity hacks. What if effectiveness came not from forcing outcomes, but from aligning with the natural flow of circumstances? What if the secret to accomplishing more was actually doing less, but doing it with precision? This isn't about becoming passive or abandoning your goals. It's about recognizing that most of our daily friction comes not from external obstacles, but from our own rigid approach to navigating them. Like a river that carves Grand Canyons through patient persistence rather than violent assault, we can learn to shape our world through principles that honor both efficiency and ease. Create empty space. In the valley where I once lived, there was a farmer who worked from dawn until long after dusk, filling every moment with activity. His fields were always busy with planting, harvesting, or preparation. Yet his crops consistently underperformed compared to his neighbor, an elderly woman who seemed to spend half her time sitting quietly under a persimmon tree. One day, the exhausted farmer approached her. "How do you grow such abundant crops while appearing to do so little?" She smiled and pointed to the space between her planted rows. "The emptiness feeds the fullness," she said. "Seeds need space to breathe, roots need room to spread, and the farmer needs time to observe what the land is truly asking for." In our packed schedules and overflowing inboxes, we've forgotten this fundamental truth, the value of the interval. Empty space isn't wasted time, it's where clarity emerges, where better decisions incubate, where our nervous systems can recalibrate from reactive mode to responsive wisdom. Consider your last important decision. Did it emerge from a moment of frantic thinking, or from a spacious pause where the right path became obvious? Most people can recall that their best insights arrived not during the storm of analysis, but in the quiet aftermath, while walking, showering, or sitting in comfortable silence. The practice is surprisingly simple: build deliberate emptiness into your days. This might mean leaving 15 minutes of buffer time between meetings, taking 3 conscious breaths before responding to difficult emails, or, radical as it may sound, having 1 day per week with no planned activities after 6 p.m. I remember speaking with a software architect who transformed her team's performance simply by instituting Pause Fridays. No new projects launched, no major decisions made, just time to reflect on the week's patterns and prepare for what was emerging. Within 3 months, their bug rates dropped significantly and their innovation metrics soared. When you stop filling every space with activity, you create room for wisdom to enter. Be vessel, not hammer. Watch how a skilled potter works with clay. She doesn't attack the material or force it into submission. Instead, she becomes a vessel for the clay's own potential, providing just enough structure and guidance for its natural plasticity to express itself beautifully. Her hands are firm yet yielding, responsive to what the clay tells her while maintaining clear intention about the final form. This is the art of being vessel rather than hammer in our daily interactions. When someone brings you a problem, your first instinct might be to immediately offer solutions, to be the hammer that pounds the issue into shape. But what if instead you became a vessel, creating space for them to discover their own clarity? Deep listening is not simply waiting for your turn to speak. It's creating an emptiness in yourself that can hold another person's complexity without immediately trying to fix or change it. This is especially powerful in our age of quick responses and instant expertise. While everyone else is rushing to demonstrate their cleverness, you can offer something far more rare: genuine presence. I've watched managers transform their teams not by becoming better problem solvers, but by becoming better question askers. What feels most important about this to you? What would need to be true for this to work smoothly? What's one small experiment we could try? These questions create a vessel-like space where innovation can emerge organically. But being vessel doesn't mean having no boundaries or losing your substance. A clay pot is useful precisely because it maintains its shape while remaining receptive. You can listen deeply while still honoring your own values, receive input while maintaining clear decision-making authority, adapt to circumstances while staying true to your core principles. Think of someone in your life who has this quality, the ability to make you feel truly heard while never losing their own center. Notice how being around them doesn't drain your energy but somehow replenishes it. This is the power of vessel consciousness. It multiplies rather than depletes. Curves win over corners. In the ancient art of water garden design, masters knew that straight channels create turbulence while gentle curves allow water to flow with minimal friction. The same principle applies to human dynamics. When we approach conflict, negotiation, or leadership challenges with rigid, angular strategies, we often create turbulence that wastes everyone's energy. Consider how you typically handle resistance. Perhaps someone pushes back on your idea in a meeting, or a family member becomes defensive during a difficult conversation. The corner-like approach is to meet resistance with counter-resistance, argue harder, present more evidence, push more forcefully. But corners create collision, and collision creates heat without forward movement. Curves, on the other hand, redirect energy rather than opposing it. When you encounter resistance, you can acknowledge it, explore it, even dance with it, while gradually guiding the flow toward your intended destination. This isn't manipulation, it's collaboration with the natural dynamics of human psychology. A friend of mine, a union negotiator, mastered this principle after years of exhausting confrontations. Instead of entering negotiations with demands and counter-demands, she began each session by asking, "What would a win look like for everyone in this room?" Then she'd map out the various needs on a whiteboard, looking for the natural curves where different interests could flow together rather than crash into each other. The results were remarkable. Negotiations that previously took months began resolving in weeks. More importantly, the agreements held because everyone felt they had been part of crafting the solution rather than coerced into accepting it. This curve-like approach applies to self-leadership as well. When you notice internal resistance to a new habit or goal, instead of forcing yourself through willpower, you can get curious about the resistance. What need is it protecting? What fear is it expressing? Often, working with your own psychology curves rather than bulldozing through them creates lasting change with much less effort. Depth before width. In our culture of multitasking and endless opportunities, we often spread ourselves across the surface of many things rather than diving deep into the few that matter most. But watch how water behaves when it encounters obstacles. It doesn't scatter in all directions, it deepens until it finds a way through. There's a profound satisfaction that comes from doing one thing completely, from bringing your full presence to whatever task is before you. This isn't just about productivity, though deep work often yields far better results than scattered effort. It's about the quality of attention itself, the way that focusing completely on something allows both you and the task to reveal new possibilities. I think of a master calligrapher I once knew who spent an entire morning working on a single character. To an outside observer, it might have seemed inefficient. But each repetition was teaching him something new about balance, rhythm, and the relationship between intention and expression. By noon, he had not only perfected that character but had discovered insights that improved his entire approach to the art. This principle of depth before width can revolutionize how you approach your daily work. Instead of checking email while in meetings while thinking about dinner plans, what if you gave each activity the gift of your complete attention? Instead of juggling 5 priority projects, what if you identified the one that would make the biggest difference and focused there until it flowed naturally toward completion? The practice isn't about becoming rigid or ignoring everything else in your life. It's about recognizing that your attention, like water, works best when it's concentrated rather than dispersed. You can still be responsive to urgent matters, but from a place of depth rather than surface-level reactivity. Tidal rhythm. The ocean doesn't maintain the same energy level all day long. It flows in and out, rises and falls, creating a natural rhythm that sustains itself across decades and centuries. Yet most of us try to maintain peak performance from morning until night, then wonder why we feel depleted and ineffective. Understanding your natural tidal rhythm means recognizing that some parts of your day and week are naturally suited for expansion, tackling big projects, having important conversations, making significant decisions. Other periods are better for contraction, organizing, reflecting, processing, and restoring your energy for the next cycle of expansion. This isn't about being lazy during low-energy periods, it's about matching your activities to your natural rhythms rather than fighting against them. When you're in a high-tide phase, you can take on challenging work that requires creativity and focus. When you're in a low-tide phase, you can handle routine tasks, organize your environment, or engage in the kind of reflection that prepares you for the next wave of productivity. Most people can identify their natural rhythms once they start paying attention. Are you naturally more creative in the morning or evening? Do you handle difficult conversations better earlier or later in the week? When do you naturally feel like organizing and when do you feel like innovating? A marketing director I worked with discovered that her best strategic thinking happened on Tuesday and Wednesday mornings, while Thursday and Friday afternoons were perfect for routine administrative tasks. Instead of fighting this rhythm, she restructured her schedule to align with it. Within a month, she was accomplishing the same amount of work in significantly less time and with much greater satisfaction. The key is to stop treating every hour as if it should be equally productive and start treating your energy like the natural resource it is, something that flows in cycles and can be channeled wisely or wasted through poor timing. Boundaries as river banks. Perhaps no concept is more misunderstood in discussions of flow than the relationship between boundaries and freedom. Many people think that flowing like water means saying yes to everything, being available to everyone, and never creating limits that might seem rigid or unfriendly. But observe any healthy river, it's not a formless flood spreading in all directions. It has banks that give it direction, depth, and power. Your personal boundaries are like riverbanks, they don't restrict your flow, they focus it. They channel your energy toward what matters most while preventing it from being dissipated across every demand and distraction that presents itself. Saying no to the wrong things gives you the energy to say yes wholeheartedly to the right things. This is particularly crucial in our age of infinite connectivity. Without clear boundaries around your time, attention, and energy, you become like a river without banks, covering a lot of ground but with no real depth or direction. Every notification becomes equally important, every request equally urgent, every opportunity equally compelling. But healthy boundaries aren't walls built from fear or rigidity. They're conscious choices made from clarity about your values and priorities. They can be permeable when appropriate, allowing special circumstances or genuine emergencies to shift your usual patterns, while still providing reliable structure for your daily flow. I think of a physician who learned to create beautiful boundaries around her evening hours. Instead of being available for non-urgent questions until midnight, she instituted a policy of responding to routine inquiries only during specific daytime hours. This wasn't about caring less for her patients, it was about preserving her energy so she could care for them more effectively during the times when she was truly needed. The same principle applies to mental boundaries, choosing which thoughts deserve your attention and which ones you can let pass by like leaves floating on a stream. Emotional boundaries, deciding which energies you'll absorb from others and which ones you'll let flow past. Digital boundaries, creating sacred spaces in your day that remain untouched by the endless stream of information and stimulation. Clarity is transparency. Have you ever tried to navigate with muddy water in your glass? Everything becomes unclear, and even simple decisions become unnecessarily complex. The same thing happens when we communicate through layers of unnecessary complexity, jargon, or emotional confusion. Clarity isn't about dumbing things down or avoiding nuance. It's about removing everything that doesn't serve the essential message, like a mountain spring that carries only what the earth has naturally filtered. When your communication becomes transparent, others can see directly to your meaning without having to decode or translate. This applies to how you communicate with others and, equally importantly, how you communicate with yourself. Internal clarity, Knowing what you actually think and feel rather than what you think you should think and feel is the foundation for every other kind of effectiveness. Practice speaking and writing as if your words were water, clean, essential, flowing directly toward their purpose. Notice how much of daily communication is actually foam, bubbles of filler words, unnecessary explanations, defensive positioning, or attempts to sound more impressive than necessary. Reflection questions. Take a moment to consider, which of these principles resonates most strongly with your current life situation? Where do you notice yourself using force when flow might be more effective? What would change in your daily experience if you approached just one challenging area of your life with water-like adaptability instead of hammer-like persistence? Practice. For the next 3 days, choose one of these principles to experiment with consciously. If you selected curves win over corners, notice one situation each day where you can respond to resistance by getting curious about it rather than pushing against it. If you chose depth before width, identify your most important task each morning and give it your complete attention for at least 25 minutes before moving to anything else. If tidal rhythm called to you, track your energy levels hourly for 3 days to identify your natural patterns of expansion and contraction. At the end of each day, spend 5 minutes writing about what you noticed, not to judge or analyze, but simply to become aware of how these principles feel in your actual lived experience. Daily practices. I want to share with you something I've learned after decades of watching water move through the world. Transformation happens not in grand gestures, but in the quiet persistence of daily flow. Just as a river carves canyons through the simple act of moving forward, drop by drop, day by day, so too does your life reshape itself through the practices you choose to carry. When I first began teaching the way of water, students would often approach me with eyes bright with enthusiasm, asking for the secret technique, the master practice that would unlock everything at once. I would smile and point to the stream nearby, where water moved neither fast nor slow, but in perfect rhythm with the terrain it encountered. Watch, I would say. The water doesn't perform one magnificent act. It simply shows up, consistently, and lets each moment teach it how to flow. This is what I offer you now, not a single transformative moment, but a collection of gentle practices that will gradually reshape the landscape of your days. Each practice is designed to last between 2 and 10 minutes, fitting naturally into the spaces between your existing commitments like water finding its way between stones. The river's edge breath, 2 minutes. Let me guide you to your first practice, one that begins each day by establishing the natural width of your inner riverbed. I call this the river's edge breath, and it works by teaching your body the difference between constriction and spaciousness. Find a comfortable position, whether sitting or standing. Close your eyes and imagine yourself sitting beside a narrow mountain stream, its banks pressed close together, water rushing frantically between confined walls. Feel how the hurried water creates tension, turbulence, resistance against its boundaries. Now breathe in slowly, and as you do, imagine the banks of this stream gently widening. Your inhale is the soft expansion of the riverbed, creating more space for the water to flow. Feel your ribcage expanding like earth giving way, your spine lengthening like banks stretching toward a wider horizon. As you exhale, don't collapse back to the narrow channel. Instead, maintain this spaciousness while allowing the water of your breath to flow smoothly through this wider bed. The current becomes gentler now, more sustainable, carrying whatever it encounters with grace rather than force. Continue this for 6 to 8 breaths, each inhale widening the banks a little more, each exhale maintaining the spaciousness while allowing natural flow. With each cycle, quietly notice what enters your awareness, sounds, sensations, thoughts, emotions, and let them flow downstream without grasping or pushing away. I've watched hundreds of people discover through this simple practice that they've been living with unnecessarily narrow margins, forcing their life's energy through spaces too small to accommodate their natural flow. The river's edge breath teaches you that expansion and flow work together. You can be both spacious and directed, both open and purposeful. Tidal check-ins, morning and evening. Water knows something we often forget: energy moves in natural cycles. The ocean doesn't maintain the same intensity at all times. It breathes with the rhythm of tides, sometimes advancing with power, sometimes retreating to gather strength. Your energy follows similar patterns, and working with these cycles rather than against them transforms both your efficiency and your peace. Twice each day, once in the morning and once in the evening, pause for what I call a tidal check-in. This practice takes less than 3 minutes but provides the awareness you need to align your actions with your natural rhythms. Begin by placing one hand on your heart and one on your belly. Take 3 slow breaths, feeling the rise and fall of your chest and abdomen. Now ask yourself 3 simple questions, rating each on a scale from 0 to 5. What is my energy tide right now? 0 represents the lowest ebb, you feel drained, depleted, barely moving. 5 represents the highest flow, you feel vital, dynamic, ready to engage with whatever comes. Most days you'll find yourself somewhere in the middle, and that's perfectly natural. How clear is my focus? 0 means scattered, pulled in many directions, unable to hold attention on any one thing. 5 means laser-sharp clarity, able to direct your awareness precisely where you choose. Notice this without judgment. Sometimes scattered attention means you're processing something important beneath the surface. What is the quality of my emotional waters? 0 represents turbulent, muddy, agitated feelings that cloud your ability to see clearly. 5 represents clear, calm, transparent emotions that support rather than hinder your decisions. Remember, even muddy water serves a purpose. Sometimes it carries nutrients or signals that something upstream needs attention. After checking these 3 tidal indicators, adjust your day accordingly. If your energy is at a 2 but your schedule demands a 5, see what can be moved, delegated, or simplified. If your focus is scattered but you have detail-oriented work planned, consider whether this is the right time for that task or if something more fluid would better match your current state. The evening check-in serves a different purpose. It helps you understand your patterns over time and prepare for restoration. If you notice your energy has been running high for several days, tomorrow might naturally call for a gentler pace. If your emotions have been turbulent, tonight might be perfect for practices that promote settling and clarity. I've seen people transform their relationship with productivity through this simple awareness. Instead of fighting their natural rhythms, they begin to dance with them, accomplishing more with less friction and finding sustainable ways to engage with their most important work. The empty 5% rule. In the ancient art of pottery, masters know that the most important part of a bowl is not the clay, but the emptiness it holds. Without space, there is no vessel. Without emptiness, there is no capacity to receive. Your days, like bowls, need emptiness to function. I invite you to practice what I call the empty 5% rule. Reserve 5% of your waking hours, roughly 45 minutes, completely free of scheduled activities, objectives, or predetermined outcomes. This isn't time for meditation or exercise or any other purposeful activity. This is time for pure emptiness, for allowing complexity to settle like silt in still water. You might think 45 minutes sounds like too much, but consider, if water never had pools along its journey, it would arrive at the sea carrying all the debris it picked up along the way. These empty spaces serve as settling ponds for your mind and nervous system. Distribute this empty time however feels most natural. Perhaps 15 minutes in the morning, sitting with coffee before checking any messages. Maybe 20 minutes at lunch, simply watching clouds or people passing by. 10 minutes in the evening, standing by a window and letting the day's experiences settle into memory. During these empty periods, resist the urge to make them productive. Don't plan, don't solve problems, don't catch up on small tasks. If thoughts arise, and they will, let them pass through your awareness like leaves floating downstream. If your mind protests this apparent waste of time, remember that even the busiest river has quiet eddies where fish rest and plants take root. The magic of this practice reveals itself gradually. You'll begin to notice that solutions emerge during these empty spaces, not because you're trying to find them, but because clarity has room to surface. Decisions become easier when they're not crowded by constant mental activity. Creativity flows more freely when it isn't competing with endless to-do lists for your attention. Meandering walk, 10 to 15 minutes. Your body is a river that has forgotten how to follow its natural course. Most of our movement follows straight lines, from bed to bathroom, from car to office, from chair to chair in predetermined patterns. We walk with destinations, exercise with goals, move with purpose. But water teaches us that sometimes the most efficient path is not the straightest one. Once or twice a week, take what I call a meandering walk. Step outside with no destination in mind, no fitness goal to achieve, no problem to solve through movement. Simply begin walking and let your feet follow whatever path feels most interesting in each moment. Turn left because the light falls beautifully on that wall. Follow a curved sidewalk because its shape pleases you. Stop to observe a tree or watch a bird or notice the way shadows play across pavement. Walk faster when your body wants to move, slower when something catches your attention. The only rule is to avoid straight lines whenever possible. Let your path curve and wind like a river finding its way through landscape. Pay attention to how this kind of movement affects your inner state. Notice how walking without a destination changes the quality of your thoughts. Observe whether problems that seemed solid and immovable begin to shift when your body moves in fluid, unpredictable patterns. This practice trains more than your legs, it trains your capacity for responsive spontaneity. In a world that rewards rigid planning and straight-line thinking, meandering walk reminds your nervous system what it feels like to trust your instincts, to respond to what's actually present rather than what you think should happen. I've watched executives discover breakthrough solutions during meandering walks that eluded them through hours of focused analysis. I've seen parents find patience they thought they'd lost by letting their bodies remember how to move without agenda. The path that wanders often arrives at destinations the straight road never could have reached. Liquid rituals, tea and water practices. Water in your hands becomes a teacher if you know how to listen. Throughout your day, you encounter water in many forms: the morning glass that helps you wake, the cup of tea that provides comfort, the splash of cool water on your face that brings clarity. Each of these encounters offers an opportunity to return to the present moment and remember your fluid nature. Create what I call liquid rituals, small ceremonies around drinking and touching water that serve as anchors to presence throughout your day. When you pour water, pour it slowly and listen to the sound it makes as it fills the container. When you lift a cup to your lips, pause for a moment and feel the weight of liquid in your hands. When you drink, taste the water fully, its temperature, its texture, its journey from source to your body. These rituals work especially well during transitions. Before checking email, drink a full glass of water with complete attention. When switching from one task to another, wash your hands slowly, feeling the water's temperature and movement across your skin. When you feel stress beginning to accumulate, step away and make tea or coffee with deliberate, unhurried movements. The key is not the specific liquid or action, but the quality of presence you bring to these ordinary moments. Water has no agenda other than to flow and adapt. When you drink mindfully, you temporarily align yourself with this same quality of open responsiveness. I particularly recommend an evening ritual I call the settling cup. Choose one warm beverage, tea, herbal tisane, warm water with lemon, that becomes your signal to the nervous system that the day's activities are complete. Prepare it slowly, hold it with both hands, and drink it without reading, listening to anything, or engaging in conversation. Let this be a bridge between the active energy of your day and the restorative energy of night. One crystal clear thing. In the rushing complexity of modern life, clarity often gets lost in the volume of options and obligations. But water shows us something important: even a powerful river flows in one direction at a time. It may encounter many obstacles and curve around numerous bends, but in each moment, it moves with singular purpose toward its natural destination. Each morning, practice what I call choosing one crystal clear thing. Before checking messages, before reviewing your task list, before the day's complexity begins to cloud your vision, identify the single action that would have the most meaningful impact if completed with full presence and attention. This isn't necessarily the most urgent item on your list or the task that would make others happiest. It's the action that, when you imagine having completed it with care and attention, brings the deepest sense of alignment and satisfaction. Sometimes this will be work-related, a difficult conversation, a creative project, a problem requiring focused analysis. Sometimes it will be personal, a letter to a friend, time with your children, attention to your own physical well-being. The crucial element is singularity. Choose only one thing, and commit to protecting it from the fragmentation that divides your attention throughout the rest of the day. Treat this choice as sacred space, like a quiet pool in the center of a busy stream where important things can take root and grow. When you engage with your one crystal clear thing, bring the full presence you would offer to a meditation. Turn off notifications, close other projects, let others know you're unavailable. Work steadily but without rushing, like water flowing downhill, persistent, unhurried, naturally powerful. I've observed that people who practice this consistently often accomplish more in their protected time with one thing than they previously managed in entire mornings of scattered effort. More importantly, they develop a felt sense of what truly matters beneath the noise of external demands. Clarity, like water, has its own intelligence when we stop muddying it with too many competing priorities. Digital sedimentation practice. Your relationship with technology reveals much about your relationship with flow. Most people interact with their devices like water crashing against a dam, frantic, scattered energy that dissipates without purpose. But you can learn to approach your digital environment like a river approaching a delta, allowing what's essential to flow through while letting the sediment of distraction settle out naturally. Practice what I call digital sedimentation once a week. Instead of forcefully deleting apps, unsubscribing from everything, or making dramatic changes that you probably won't maintain, work with the natural tendency of unused things to settle toward the bottom of your awareness. Begin by moving all non-essential apps from your phone's home screen to a second or third screen. Don't delete anything yet, simply create space between your immediate attention and these digital options. Over the following weeks, notice which apps you actually seek out versus which ones you never miss. This is sedimentation in action. The important rises to the surface, the unnecessary settles toward the bottom. Apply the same principle to your email, documents, and digital files. Instead of spending hours organizing everything perfectly, move items you haven't used recently into folders labeled sediment with the current date. After 3 months, you'll clearly see what has settled out as truly unnecessary and what has remained actively important. This approach works with your natural psychology instead of against it. Rather than making dramatic decisions that create internal resistance, you're simply creating space for clarity to emerge organically. You're not depriving yourself of anything, you're letting natural selection work on your digital ecosystem. The deeper teaching here extends beyond technology. This practice trains your capacity to distinguish between what actively serves your life's flow and what merely occupies space through habit or fear of missing out. Like water naturally finding its most efficient path, your attention learns to flow toward what genuinely matters when given room to settle and choose. Micro Qigong for daily flow, 3 minutes. Your body holds the pattern of your entire life. When your shoulders carry chronic tension, when your neck holds rigid angles, when your breathing remains shallow and quick, these physical patterns create internal resistance that affects every area of your experience. But just as water always seeks to restore its natural flow, your body remembers how to move with fluid ease when given gentle reminders. 3 times throughout your day, morning, midday, and evening, practice a sequence I call Micro Qigong for daily flow. This takes only 3 minutes but works like removing small debris from a stream. Everything flows more smoothly afterward. Stand with your feet hip-width apart and imagine roots growing down from your feet into the earth. Let your arms hang loosely at your sides. Begin by slowly rolling your shoulders backward 5 times, imagining each roll releasing a day's worth of accumulated tension. Feel the shoulder blades melting down your back like ice releasing its grip on a riverbank in spring. Next, gently turn your head from side to side, but instead of controlling the movement with your neck muscles, imagine your head is floating on the surface of your spine like a leaf on water. Let the turning happen easily, without force or agenda. Do this 5 times in each direction, breathing naturally throughout. Now raise your arms overhead as you inhale, imagining you're reaching up through water rather than air. Feel the gentle resistance and support that water would provide, and let your movements become correspondingly fluid and supported. Exhale as you lower your arms, palms facing down, as if gently pressing through water. Repeat this 5 times, coordinating breath and movement like tides coordinating with the moon. Finally, place your hands on your lower ribs and take 3 deep breaths that expand your ribcage sideways rather than just forward and back. Imagine your torso is widening like a riverbed in flood season, not dramatically, but with natural, sustainable expansion that creates more space for whatever wants to flow through you. The beauty of this practice lies not in the specific movements, but in the quality of attention you bring to releasing unnecessary holding patterns. Your body relaxes most completely when it feels witnessed with kindness rather than commanded with effort. As you begin to weave these practices into your daily rhythm, remember that you're not trying to master them all at once. Like water finding its way through new terrain, let yourself explore these practices with curiosity rather than performance pressure. Some will feel immediately natural, others may seem foreign at first. Trust your own flow. The practices that serve you will gradually become as natural as breathing, while others may serve their purpose for a season and then flow naturally out of your routine. Moments for reflection. Take a moment to consider, which of these practices sounds most appealing to you right now? What does that attraction tell you about what your life's river most needs? More space, clearer direction, better rhythm, or something else entirely? Notice how you feel about the idea of empty time in your schedule. Does the empty 5% rule create excitement, anxiety, or something else? Your reaction offers valuable information about your relationship with productivity and rest. Think about your current relationship with your devices and digital environment. When do you feel most like water flowing smoothly through technology, and when do you feel more like water hitting a dam? Practice invitation. For the next 3 days, choose just one of these practices to explore. Don't commit to doing it perfectly or permanently, simply notice what happens when you bring the quality of water-like attention to this small part of your daily routine. Pay attention not only to any immediate effects, but to how this one practice might naturally want to connect with or influence other parts of your day. Like water finding its natural course, let the practice teach you how it wants to flow in your particular life. The ancient masters knew that great rivers begin as tiny springs, hardly noticeable among the rocks and moss of mountain slopes. Your transformation, too, begins in these small, consistent practices that seem almost insignificant in isolation but gather power and clarity as they flow together through the landscape of your days. Trust the process, trust the practices, and most of all, trust your own natural wisdom to guide you toward the flow that serves not only your own flourishing, but the flourishing of all those whose lives your river touches. Stories from the river, parables and studies of transformation. As I sit by this ancient stream that has witnessed countless seasons, I'm reminded that the deepest truths of the Tao are not found in abstract concepts, but in the lived experiences of those who dare to flow with life rather than against it. The water beside me carries stories, some of struggle transformed into grace, others of rigid banks that learn to bend, and all of them showing us that the way of water is not merely philosophical poetry, but a practical path walked by real people facing real challenges. Today, I want to share with you 6 stories that have found their way to me like tributaries joining a river. Each one illuminates a different aspect of the water-like way of being, and each one emerged from someone who, like you perhaps, felt caught between the rushing demands of modern life and the deeper current of wisdom that flows beneath. The leader who released the dam. Her name was Sarah, and when I first heard her story, she was drowning in the very waters she was meant to guide. As a department director at a growing technology company, she had built what she called the perfect system, every project mapped, every team member's hours tracked, every decision flowing through her desk like water through a narrow channel. I thought I was being responsible, she told me during one of our conversations, her voice carrying the weariness that comes from swimming upstream for too long. Every email, every deadline, every creative choice, it all had to pass through me. I was the guardian of quality, the keeper of standards. But rivers teach us that when we force all the water through too narrow a space, pressure builds dangerously. Sarah's team had begun to stagnate. Creativity dried up as people waited for her approval. Innovation slowed to a trickle as every idea needed her blessing. She was working 14-hour days, yet projects were taking longer than ever to complete. The breaking point came during what should have been a celebration. Her team had finally launched a product after 8 months of development. Instead of joy, there was exhaustion. Instead of pride, there was resentment. One of her most talented developers handed in his resignation that very day, saying, "I feel like I'm not even doing my job anymore. I'm just waiting for permission to think." That night, Sarah sat in her car in the empty parking lot and wept. She realized she had become a dam in her own river, backing up the very flow she was meant to facilitate. The transformation began quietly, as most real changes do. Instead of redesigning her entire management approach overnight, which would have been forcing once again, she started with one simple practice, the morning question. Each day, she would ask herself, what would happen if I didn't control this particular thing today? The first experiment was small. She let her design team choose their own color palette for a minor feature, without her input. She spent that morning gripping her coffee cup tighter than necessary, fighting the urge to intervene. But the result was beautiful, and more importantly, it was completed in half the usual time. Gradually, like a dam being opened one gate at a time, Sarah began to release control. She moved from checking every email to checking twice a day. She shifted from approving every decision to establishing clear parameters and letting her team navigate within them. She transformed her role from a bottleneck to what she began calling the river engineer, someone who maintains the banks and ensures healthy flow, but doesn't direct every drop of water. The change in her team's energy was palpable. Projects began moving with natural momentum. People stayed late not because they had to, but because they were excited about what they were creating. The developer who had resigned asked if he could come back. But perhaps the most profound shift happened in Sarah herself. I used to go home exhausted from making hundreds of small decisions, she reflected months later. Now I go home energized from watching other people make brilliant choices I never would have thought of. Her new approach wasn't about abandoning standards or shirking responsibility. Instead, she had learned what the Tao teaches, that true leadership is like water supporting a boat, powerfully present, but allowing the vessel to find its own direction within the current. Pause for a moment and feel into this story. Have you ever found yourself trying to control every drop of water in your own river? Where in your life might you be creating unnecessary dams? Consider this. What would happen if you released control of one small thing today, not abandoning responsibility, but trusting the natural flow that wants to emerge? The designer who ended the endless sprint. Marcus lived his creative life like a river during flood season, always at maximum capacity, always rushing, always on the verge of overflowing his banks. As a freelance graphic designer, he had convinced himself that stopping meant falling behind, that rest was a luxury he couldn't afford in a competitive market. His typical week looked like a torrent, client calls starting at 7 a.m., designing until midnight, weekends spent on passion projects that might lead to better paying work. He drank coffee like it was his primary source of hydration and wore his exhaustion like a badge of professional honor. I thought I was being professional, Marcus shared with me. In creative fields, everyone talks about hustling, about grinding, about being always on. I believed that if I wasn't moving at maximum speed, I was somehow failing. But rivers know something that Marcus had forgotten. Even the most powerful current needs pools of stillness to remain healthy. Without these deeper places, a river becomes all turbulence and foam, losing its ability to carry anything of substance. The wake-up call came in the form of what should have been his biggest triumph, a major branding project for a company he'd dreamed of working with. But when the day came to present his concepts, his mind was blank. Not creatively blocked, but literally empty, like a river that had run itself dry. He sat in that conference room, looking at designs that he had crafted with technical skill but no soul, and realized he couldn't even remember the creative spark that had made him love this work in the first place. The client was polite but unimpressed. The project went to someone else. That night, Marcus did something he hadn't done in 3 years. He closed his laptop at sunset and sat on his apartment balcony without any device, any project, any goal other than breathing. It felt terrifying and liberating in equal measure. The transformation came through embracing what I call tidal rhythms, the natural alternation between flow and stillness that water teaches us. Instead of fighting against the need for rest, Marcus began to design his work around it. He started small, instituting what he called low-tide Fridays. Every Friday became a day for low-intensity work, organizing files, gentle research, responding to emails, activities that kept him moving but allowed his creative waters to gather depth. Then came spring cleaning Sundays, one Sunday each month dedicated to clearing his physical and digital spaces, like a river depositing sediment and clearing its channel for cleaner flow. The most radical change was building pool weeks into his schedule, 1 week every 6 weeks where he would take on no new projects, complete existing work at a gentle pace, and allow himself time for what he called creative wandering. He would visit museums not for inspiration but for pleasure, take long walks not for exercise but for contemplation, cook elaborate meals not for efficiency but for joy. His initial fear was that clients would see him as unreliable or lazy. Instead, the opposite happened. The work he produced after his pool weeks carried a depth and originality that attracted better clients and higher fees. His creative solutions became more elegant, more surprising, more effective. "I used to force inspiration like trying to squeeze water from a stone," Marcus told me a year later. "Now I create space for it to arise naturally, like a spring feeding into a stream. The ideas that come are clearer, stronger, more unique." He had learned one of water's essential lessons: depth creates power, and power sustained over time accomplishes more than intensity that burns out quickly. Notice how this lands in your body, the image of sustainable creative flow versus the exhaustion of endless pushing. Where in your life have you confused constant motion with genuine progress? What might change if you built pool weeks or even pool hours into your own rhythm? What creative depths might emerge from that stillness? The doctor who learned to navigate curves. Emergency medicine, Dr. Elena Rodriguez often said, was like trying to direct water during a hurricane, everything urgent, everyone under pressure, conflicts erupting like sudden storms. As the attending physician in a busy urban hospital, she faced daily battles between departments that seemed as natural and inevitable as weather. Radiology says they can't rush the scan. Surgery says they won't wait another hour. The family is demanding answers I don't have yet. And I'm standing in the middle, feeling like I have to force everyone into alignment, Elena described her typical day. "I thought leadership meant being the strongest voice in the room, the one who could power through resistance and make things happen through sheer determination." Her approach was like trying to straighten a meandering river, exhausting, ultimately futile, and creating turbulence everywhere she applied force. Conflicts with colleagues were frequent. Staff turnover in her department was higher than average. She was respected for her medical skill but dreaded for her management style. The turning point came during a particularly chaotic night shift. A trauma patient needed immediate surgery, but the surgical team was delayed with another emergency. The patient's family was understandably frantic. Elena found herself in a heated argument with the surgical coordinator in front of the family, both of them raising voices, both trying to force their perspective onto a situation that required flexibility, not force. Later, as she sat in the empty break room at 3 a.m., Elena realized she was fighting the river instead of working with it. The hospital, like any complex system, had its own natural currents of communication, decision-making, and priority setting. Instead of learning to navigate these currents skillfully, she had been trying to redirect them through confrontation. She began experimenting with what she came to call curved communication, approaching conflicts not as battles to be won, but as rivers to be navigated. Instead of stating her position immediately, she started with questions that helped her understand the deeper currents flowing beneath surface disagreements. When radiology seemed slow, instead of demanding faster service, she would ask, "Help me understand what you're seeing that might affect timing." When surgery appeared inflexible, rather than arguing about schedules, she would inquire, "What would need to be different for us to find another approach?" The change was remarkable, like watching rapids smooth into a flowing stream. People who had been defensive began offering solutions. Departments that had seemed uncooperative revealed legitimate constraints that Elena had never understood. Most importantly, patients and families began to sense the shift in energy, less tension, more collaborative problem-solving. Elena's breakthrough insight was that resistance often contains important information, like rocks in a river that indicate something significant about the landscape. Instead of trying to blast through resistance, she learned to ask what it was protecting or revealing. During one memorable case, an elderly patient needed a procedure that required coordination between 3 different departments. In the past, Elena would have scheduled a meeting, laid out the timeline, and expected everyone to adapt to her plan. This time, she approached each department individually, asking not can you accommodate this schedule, but what would ideal timing look like from your perspective. The conversation revealed that radiology could provide much faster turnaround if they did the imaging first thing in the morning rather than midday. Surgery preferred afternoon procedures for elderly patients because post-anesthesia recovery was generally smoother. The patient's family needed time to arrange for specialized transportation. By following these natural currents instead of fighting them, Elena created a plan that worked better for everyone and resulted in a significantly improved outcome for the patient. I used to think that being a leader meant being like a dam, strong, immovable, controlling the flow through force, Elena reflected. Now I see leadership as being like experienced river guide, reading the currents, understanding the landscape, and helping everyone navigate together toward the same destination. The most profound change wasn't just in her professional relationships, but in her own stress levels. By working with the natural flows of her environment instead of against them, Elena found that her days, while still intense, no longer left her feeling like she had been in battle. Feel the difference in your body between these two approaches, forcing your will onto a situation versus finding the natural currents and working with them. Where in your life have you been trying to straighten rivers that might be better navigated as they are? Consider, what resistance are you currently fighting that might actually contain valuable information about better ways to flow? The father who discovered clear boundaries. James thought he was being a good father and a dedicated employee by saying yes to everything. Yes to overtime projects that would advance his career. Yes to weekend coaching his daughter's soccer team. Yes to evening school events for his son. Yes to being available 24/7 for work emergencies. He was like a river without banks, spreading himself so thin that he was barely present anywhere. I was drowning in my own good intentions, James told me. I wanted to be the dad who never missed anything and the employee who could always be counted on. I thought that having boundaries was selfish, that it meant I didn't care enough. But what James discovered is what every river knows: without clear banks, water becomes a flood, overwhelming, destructive, and ultimately ineffective. His attempts to be everything to everyone meant he was truly present for no one. His wake-up call came during his son's school play. James was sitting in the auditorium, but his attention kept drifting to his phone buzzing with work messages. He was physically present but mentally scattered across a dozen different demands. When his son took the stage for his big solo, James realized with horror that he had missed the first half while responding to an urgent email that could have easily waited until morning. That night, his son asked, "Dad, did you see my song?" James said yes, but they both knew it wasn't entirely true. He had been there, but he hadn't been present, and his 8-year-old son could feel the difference. The transformation began with what James learned to call riverbank engineering. Just as riverbanks don't restrict water but actually enable it to flow with more power and purpose, boundaries weren't about caring less, they were about caring more effectively. James started by mapping his energy and attention like a river system. He realized that his most important flows, deep presence with his family, creative thinking at work, and his own physical and mental restoration, were being constantly interrupted by smaller streams that seemed urgent but weren't truly important. His first experiment was establishing what he called channel hours. From 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on weekdays, his phone went into a drawer, his laptop stayed closed, and he became completely available to his family. No exceptions, no quick email checks, no multitasking. During those 2 hours, he was like a focused stream, all his attention flowing in one direction. The results were immediate and profound. His children began seeking him out during channel hours, knowing they would have his undivided attention. Conversations became deeper, games became more playful, and the quality of connection transformed dramatically. But James discovered something unexpected. By being completely unavailable for work during these hours, he actually became more effective during his work time. Knowing he had clear boundaries forced him to prioritize better, communicate more efficiently, and focus more intensely during business hours. He expanded the concept to his professional life, establishing deep work channels where he was unavailable for meetings or casual conversations, and collaboration channels where he was fully present for team interactions. He learned to say, "I'm not available for calls after 7 p.m., but I'll give you my full attention first thing tomorrow morning. The most challenging part was managing his own guilt about setting boundaries. I had to learn that saying no to one thing is saying yes to something else, James reflected. Every time I said no to an evening work call, I was saying yes to reading bedtime stories with full presence. Every time I declined a weekend work project, I was saying yes to being the kind of dad who could coach soccer without checking email on the sidelines. 6 months later, James received 2 pieces of feedback that showed him how profound the changes had been. His daughter said, "Dad, you're so much more fun now. It's like you're actually here when you're here." And his supervisor, surprisingly, complimented him on his increased focus and effectiveness. "I don't know what's changed, but your work has become much more strategic and impactful." James had learned that boundaries aren't walls that keep water out, they're banks that help water flow with direction, power, and purpose. Feel the wisdom in this metaphor, boundaries as riverbanks that enable rather than restrict flow. Where in your life are you spreading yourself so thin that you're barely present anywhere? What would change if you established clear channel hours for your most important relationships and activities? What would you need to say no to in order to say yes more fully to what matters most? The entrepreneur who found her one clear thing. Maya's startup was her everything, her passion, her purpose, her path to financial freedom, and increasingly, her source of overwhelming anxiety. As the founder of a sustainable fashion company, she felt responsible for every aspect of the business: product development, marketing, finances, operations, customer service, and investor relations. She was like a river trying to flow in all directions at once, creating nothing but chaos and erosion. "I thought being an entrepreneur meant being good at everything," Maya shared during one of our conversations. "Every business book I read seemed to have a new essential strategy one needed to implement. Every successful founder I followed on social media appeared to be excelling in areas where I felt behind." Maya's days looked like a scattered stream hitting rocks, a morning spent redesigning the website, an afternoon diving into social media analytics, an evening researching manufacturing processes, and late nights worrying about cash flow projections. She was working harder than ever but felt like she was making progress nowhere. The breaking point came during what should have been a moment of celebration. A major retailer had expressed interest in carrying her products, but when they asked for her core differentiator, Maya found herself listing 15 different things that made her company special. The buyer's polite but puzzled response was telling: "It sounds like you do a lot of things well, but I'm not sure what you do better than anyone else." That night, Maya sat in her tiny studio apartment, surrounded by fabric samples, business plans, and marketing materials, feeling like she was drowning in her own dreams. She realized that in trying to build everything, she was building nothing with real strength or clarity. The transformation came through embracing what she learned to call the power of the single current. Instead of trying to be a delta spreading in every direction, she would become like a mountain stream, clear, focused, and powerful in its singular flow. Maya spent 3 days doing something that felt terrifyingly unproductive. She stopped all activities except walking and thinking. She carried a single question with her: if I could only do one thing exceptionally well, what would create the most meaningful impact? Through this process of what felt like sediment settling in still water, clarity emerged. Maya's true passion and unique strength wasn't in any of the dozen areas she'd been struggling to master, it was in the story of transformation that her sustainable fabrics represented. She wasn't just selling clothes, she was creating a narrative of renewal, of beauty emerging from materials that others had discarded. Maya made a radical decision that felt like stripping away everything non-essential from her river system. She stopped trying to be a social media guru, delegating that to a freelancer who understood her vision. She stopped attempting to become a manufacturing expert, partnering with an established producer who shared her values. She stopped forcing herself to be a finance wizard, bringing on a part-time CFO who could speak the language of investors. Instead, Maya focused all her energy on becoming the world's best storyteller for sustainable transformation. She dove deep into understanding her customers' emotional journey, crafting narratives that helped people see their clothing choices as expressions of their values, developing content that transformed shopping from consumption into conscious participation in environmental healing. The results were like watching a scattered stream suddenly find its proper channel. Within 6 months, Maya's clear focus on storytelling had attracted a community of passionate customers who became advocates for her brand. The retailer who had been confused by her scattered messaging now understood exactly what she offered and placed a significant order. Investors who had been lukewarm about her multifaceted approach became excited about her clear vision and expertise. But the most profound change was in Maya herself. "I used to end every day feeling like I hadn't done enough in any area," she reflected. "Now I end every day knowing I've gotten deeper in the one area that truly matters. I'm building something with real substance instead of spreading myself across 1,000 surfaces." Maya had discovered what water knows intuitively: power comes from concentration, not dispersion. A laser-focused stream can carve through rock, while scattered water merely dampens the surface. Notice how this story resonates in your own experience, the relief and power of focusing deeply instead of spreading widely. What is your one clear thing that you've been diluting by trying to do everything else? What would happen if you gave yourself permission to stop being good at many things in order to become extraordinary at the one thing that truly matters to you? The young man who traded likes for depth. David was 24 and drowning in the shallow end of digital life. His days were measured in notifications, his self-worth calculated in likes, and his attention scattered across platforms like water hitting concrete, splashing everywhere but penetrating nowhere. As a recent college graduate working his first marketing job, he felt constantly behind, constantly anxious, constantly comparing his inside to everyone else's carefully curated outside. "I was living in the shallows," David told me months later. "My phone was like a slot machine. I kept pulling the handle, hoping for the dopamine hit of a notification, but I never felt satisfied. I was connected to hundreds of people online but felt completely alone." David's mornings began with Instagram, continued with Twitter during his commute, involved constant Slack notifications at work, and ended with hours of TikTok videos that left him feeling simultaneously overstimulated and empty. He was like a river that had spread itself across too wide a plain, losing all depth and power. The wake-up call came during a family dinner when his grandmother asked him about his work. As David started to answer, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it reflexively, just a spam notification, but when he looked back up, his grandmother had turned away and begun talking to his cousin instead. "It was such a small moment, but it hit me like a wave," David reflected. Here was this woman who had lived through decades of real experiences, who genuinely wanted to connect with me, and I had chosen a meaningless notification over her presence. I realized I was becoming someone I didn't want to be. The transformation began not with dramatic digital detox, but with what David learned to call creating pools of depth. Instead of trying to eliminate technology entirely, which felt impossible given his work, he began to cultivate spaces and times where deeper currents could emerge. David's first experiment was the morning tea ritual. Before checking any device, he would make a simple cup of tea and sit by his apartment window for 10 minutes, just watching the world wake up. No agenda, no productivity goals, just presence. It felt awkward at first, almost boring, but gradually he began to notice things: the way light changed throughout the week, the patterns of people walking to work, the seasonal shifts in the tree outside his building. This small pool of stillness began to change the quality of his entire day. Instead of starting in reactive mode, scrolling through other people's content, he began each morning from his own center. The tea ritual became an anchor, a daily return to what David called his own frequency before tuning into the digital world. Next, David instituted what he called deep dives, 1 hour each evening dedicated to engaging with just one thing fully. Sometimes it was reading an entire article instead of skimming headlines. Sometimes it was working on a personal writing project. Sometimes it was having a real conversation with a friend over the phone instead of exchanging surface-level texts. The most profound change came when David began to approach social media like a conscious river rather than a reactive flood. Instead of scrolling mindlessly, he chose 3 people whose content genuinely inspired him and engaged thoughtfully with their posts. Instead of posting automatically, he shared only when he had something meaningful to contribute. "I stopped trying to drink from every stream and started finding the sources that actually nourished me," David explained. My online world became smaller but so much richer. The ripple effects surprised him. His boss noticed that his marketing insights had become more thoughtful and strategic. His friends began reaching out for deeper conversations, drawn by his increased presence and authenticity. Most importantly, David felt like himself again, not a scattered reflection of digital inputs, but a person with his own thoughts, interests, and rhythm. 6 months later, David's relationship with technology had transformed from compulsion to conscious choice. He used digital tools skillfully but wasn't used by them. His attention had become like a focused stream rather than scattered spray, and with that focus came a sense of agency and peace he hadn't felt since childhood. Feel into your own relationship with digital streams. Where are you drinking from sources that nourish versus those that merely stimulate? What would change if you created your own pools of depth each day? Consider, what would your life look like if you approached digital consumption like curating a garden rather than wandering through an endless marketplace? The river's teaching. As these stories settle like sediment in still water, notice what rises to the surface for you. Each person discovered something that water has always known. That power comes not from force but from finding the natural current, that effectiveness emerges from working with reality rather than against it, and that the deepest transformations often begin with the smallest shifts in direction. Sarah learned that leadership is about creating conditions for flow, not controlling every drop. Marcus discovered that depth requires alternation between current and pool, between effort and rest. Elena found that resistance often carries valuable information about better ways to navigate. James realized that boundaries enable rather than restrict meaningful flow. Maya experienced the power that comes from channeling all energy toward one clear purpose. And David discovered that conscious engagement creates deeper satisfaction than scattered consumption. These are not stories of perfection achieved, but of natural wisdom remembered, the wisdom that you already carry in your bones, in your breath, in the very water that comprises most of your being. Take a moment to consider, which of these stories resonates most deeply with your current situation? What pattern of forcing are you ready to release? What natural current are you prepared to trust? The path of water is not about becoming someone different, but about returning to your own true nature, fluid, adaptive, powerful in your authenticity, and capable of both gentle persistence and profound transformation. The river that carved these stories is the same river flowing through your life right now, waiting for you to recognize its voice and join its eternal conversation between effort and ease, between purpose and flow. Before we move forward, sit quietly for a moment and ask yourself, what is one small experiment I could try today, inspired by these stories, to bring more water-like wisdom into my own life? Trust that the answer will arise naturally, like a spring emerging from underground sources you may not even know exist. The way of water is not learned but remembered, not achieved but allowed, not forced but followed with the gentle precision of a stream finding its way home to the sea. The 30-Day River Journey, your daily practice guide. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing at the edge of a mountain stream. The water moves with such natural intelligence, never hurrying, yet never stalling. It finds the path of least resistance while maintaining its essential nature, its clarity, its purpose. This is what we're cultivating in the next 30 days, that same organic wisdom applied to your daily life. I've walked alongside thousands of seekers over the centuries, and I've learned that true transformation doesn't happen through force or sudden dramatic change. Like water carving its course through stone, lasting change happens through consistent, gentle pressure applied with awareness and patience. The 30-day program I'm sharing with you follows this natural principle. It's designed as a spiral journey rather than a linear march, allowing you to deepen and integrate each practice before adding the next layer. Think of these 4 weeks as seasons in your personal river system. Week 1 is like early spring, the ice melting, movement returning after winter's stillness. Week 2 brings the clearing of debris and obstacles, like spring waters washing winter's accumulation downstream. Week 3 is the full flowering of summer flow, when your practices align into a coherent current. And Week 4 expands into the mature power of a river that knows its course and can nourish the landscape around it. Each morning, I want you to begin with what I call the river's breath, a simple practice that takes less than 3 minutes but establishes the quality of your entire day. Sit comfortably, feet on the ground, and imagine your spine as the central channel of a river. As you inhale, feel this channel lengthen and widen. As you exhale, imagine the banks of your river expanding, creating more space for whatever the day might bring. With each breath cycle, silently name what's flowing into your awareness and what's flowing out. Tension flowing out, clarity flowing in. Urgency flowing out, presence flowing in. This isn't about forcing anything to change, it's about observing the natural exchange that's already happening and honoring it with your attention. After your river's breath, identify what I call your one crystal clear thing, the single action that, if completed with full presence, would create the most meaningful impact with the least unnecessary effort. This isn't your biggest task or your most urgent deadline, it's the action that feels most aligned with your deeper current. Write it down in 6 words or fewer. Then, for the next 20 to 40 minutes, give yourself completely to this one thing. No phone, no email, no multitasking, just you and this single clear stream of focus. The beauty of the crystal clear practice is that it trains you to recognize the difference between productive action and busy work. Water doesn't flow in all directions at once, it follows the most natural course with concentrated power. When you learn to identify and follow your daily natural course, you'll accomplish more with less effort and end your days feeling energized rather than depleted. In the middle of each day, I want you to take what I call a meandering walk. This is different from exercise or walking for destination, it's walking as practice, walking as meditation in motion. Step outside if possible, or simply walk through your home or office with fresh eyes. Let your feet choose the path based on curiosity rather than efficiency. Notice the quality of light, the temperature of the air against your skin, the sounds that usually live in the background of your awareness. If you encounter obstacles, a locked door, a crowded hallway, practice the art of the gentle curve. Don't push through, find a natural path around. This teaches your body-mind the rhythm of Wu Wei, of working with reality rather than against it. Your evening practice is what I call decanting, the art of letting the day's experiences settle so you can separate what's worth keeping from what's ready to be released. Before sleep, write exactly 5 lines in a journal or on a simple piece of paper. No more, no less. These aren't grand insights or philosophical reflections, they're simple observations about what moved through your day. The morning meeting felt rushed, but Sarah's question clarified everything. My shoulders held tension until the walk at lunch. I forced the afternoon presentation, it would have flowed better with one more question first. This practice develops your ability to perceive the subtle currents of your life without judgment, creating the awareness necessary for natural course corrections. Now let me guide you through the 4-week spiral, beginning with week 1, thawing. Many of us live in a state of subtle frozenness, not depression exactly, but a hardening of our natural flexibility. This week is about gentle warming, about rediscovering your capacity for flow without forcing dramatic change. Your primary focus is establishing the 3 daily practices I just described while paying special attention to what I call the 5% rule. Reserve 5% of each day, about 45 minutes, completely empty. Not for leisure activities or catching up on tasks, but literally empty. Sit by a window, lie on the floor, walk without destination. This empty space allows the complex experiences of modern life to settle and clarify, like sediment in a jar of river water that's been allowed to rest. During this first week, also begin noticing your personal tides, the natural rhythms of your energy, focus, and emotional availability. Most people try to maintain the same intensity throughout the day, creating unnecessary friction and exhaustion. Rivers have different qualities at different times: morning clarity, afternoon power, evening gentleness. Start tracking your own rhythms on a simple 0 to 5 scale: energy level, mental clarity, and emotional openness. Notice the patterns without trying to change them yet. Week 2 brings us to clearing, the active but gentle removal of obstacles to your natural flow. This is where we practice what I call limit as riverbed, the understanding that healthy boundaries actually increase your power rather than restrict it. A river without banks becomes a swamp, a life without conscious limits becomes scattered and ineffective. This week, your challenge is to say no to one commitment, request, or expectation each day. Not from selfishness, but from engineering wisdom. you're redesigning your life's container to better serve your essential current. Simultaneously, you'll engage in what I call digital sedimentation, a gentle approach to reducing technological overwhelm. Instead of dramatic digital detoxes that create their own stress, allow your digital environment to settle naturally. Move apps off your home screen and see which ones you actually miss. Let emails sit in your inbox for an extra hour before responding and notice which ones resolve themselves. Cancel one subscription or notification per day. Like river water naturally depositing silt as it slows, you're allowing the non-essential digital elements of your life to settle out of your main current. Week 3 opens into alignment, the phase where your practices begin to integrate into a coherent flow. This is when the individual elements you've been cultivating start to work together like a mature river system. Your focus this week is on transparent communication, expressing yourself with the clarity and directness of water. Water doesn't negotiate with obstacles, it clearly reveals their shape by flowing around them. Practice asking questions before offering solutions in meetings. Share your authentic response instead of the response you think others want to hear. Say what you mean without extra explanations or apologies, but also without sharp edges. This is also the week to experiment with what I call curve leadership in one specific area of your life. Instead of approaching challenges head-on, practice the art of the gentle approach. If there's conflict with a colleague, instead of direct confrontation, ask curious questions about their perspective. If you're stuck on a project, instead of forcing progress, create space for new information to emerge. If your child or partner is resistant to something, find the indirect path that honors their autonomy while maintaining your own clarity. Curves take longer than straight lines, but they create less turbulence and often reach the destination with everything intact. Week 4 completes the spiral with expansion, the phase where your personal practice begins to naturally benefit others. A healthy river doesn't just flow, it nourishes the entire ecosystem it touches. This week, you'll experiment with what the ancient texts called the kind of influence that comes not from pushing your agenda, but from the natural magnetism of someone who has found their authentic flow. Choose one project or relationship where you can practice what I call silent leadership, influencing through presence, consistency, and example rather than words or authority. This might mean bringing unusual calm to a stressful team meeting, maintaining your boundaries with kindness when others are reactive, or simply doing excellent work without needing recognition. You're learning to trust that aligned action creates its own influence, like a clear stream that automatically purifies whatever it touches. Throughout all 4 weeks, your Sunday practice is what I call riverbank reflection, a weekly pause to assess the health of your banks and the clarity of your current. On a simple piece of paper, rate your week in 4 areas: energy, were you depleted or regenerated? Clarity, were your decisions obvious or forced? Friction, did you fight reality or work with it? And presence, were you here or elsewhere? Based on these observations, make one small adjustment to the following week's container, perhaps earlier sleep, fewer commitments, or more transition time between activities. The genius of this spiral approach is that you're never trying to be perfect or to change everything at once. Like water finding its course, you're making small, consistent adjustments that compound over time into significant transformation. Some days your practices will flow easily, others will feel forced or forgotten entirely. This is natural. Rivers have days of drought and days of flood, but they keep moving toward their destination. The practice is to return gently to your chosen course whenever you notice you've wandered, without judgment or drama. I want to offer you 3 reflection questions to carry with you through these 30 days. First, where am I forcing when I could be flowing? This question develops your sensitivity to unnecessary effort and helps you recognize opportunities for wu-wei. Second, what wants to emerge if I create space for it? This cultivates trust in natural intelligence and reduces the anxiety of overmanaging outcomes. Third, how can I be useful without being depleted? This balances service with sustainability, ensuring your practice enhances rather than competes with your relationships and responsibilities. Your simple daily practice, then, becomes river's breath upon waking, one crystal clear thing in your first hour of focus, meandering walk when energy shifts, and decanting before sleep. 5 to 15 minutes of formal practice, creating a container for an entire day of informal practice, of living with the fluidity, intelligence, and power that are your natural inheritance. One final reflection before you begin. What would it feel like to trust your own natural timing as deeply as you trust water to find its way to the ocean? And how might your life expand if you approached each day not as a mountain to conquer, but as a river to join? The simple practice that will anchor your entire 30-day journey begins tomorrow morning with a single conscious breath, taken as an act of friendship toward yourself and trust in the intelligence that flows through all things. Integration, commitment, and your next steps. As I sit here by the riverbank this morning, watching the mist rise from water that has traveled countless miles to reach this moment, I'm reminded of something profound. Every drop that flows past me carries within it the memory of its entire journey, from the first tentative seep through mountain stone to the confident surge toward the sea. You, dear friend, have now traced a similar path through these pages, and like that water, you carry within you everything you need for what comes next. When we began this journey together, you held in your hands what I called a simple glass of water, transparent, yielding, ready to take the shape of whatever vessel received it. Now, as we approach the confluence where our paths must diverge, I see that you have become both the water and the vessel, both the river and its banks. You have learned to flow with purpose while maintaining your essential nature. Let me share with you what I have witnessed in countless souls who have walked this watery path. The moment of integration is not when you master all the practices, but when you stop trying to master them. It is when Wu Wei becomes not something you do, but something you are. It is when the artificial boundary between your spiritual practice and your daily existence dissolves like morning mist in sunlight. This morning, as I traced my finger along the surface of my teacup, feeling the ceramic's warmth against my skin, I thought of a student who came to me many years ago. She was like a mountain stream trapped behind a dam of her own making, brilliant, powerful, but rigid with the weight of her own expectations. "Master," she said, her voice tight with frustration, "I practice every day. I breathe as you taught. I make space for emptiness. I try to flow like water. But still, I feel like I'm fighting the current of my own life." I smiled and asked her to sit beside the stream that ran through our courtyard. "Tell me," I said, "what do you see?" She described the water's movement, its clarity, the way it navigated around stones and fallen leaves. Then I asked, "And what do you see that the water is trying to become?" The question hung in the air like incense. Finally, she laughed, not with humor, but with recognition. "Nothing," she whispered. "The water isn't trying to become anything. It simply is. This is the essence of integration, my friend. It is not about perfecting your practice of the Tao, it is about recognizing that you are already an expression of it. Every breath you take participates in the same rhythm that moves the tides. Every decision you make is an opportunity to align with the natural flow that governs all things. The practices I have shared with you, the breathing, the walking, the conscious pauses, these are not external disciplines imposed upon your life. They are simply ways of remembering what you already know in your deepest waters. But integration without commitment is like a river without banks. It dissipates into marshland, losing both its power and its direction. So let us speak of what I call the three fidelities: your commitment to the riverbed of your values, to the flow of your daily practices, and to the healthy margins that protect both. Your first fidelity is to your riverbed, those deep channels carved by your truest values, the non-negotiable principles that give your life its direction. Just as a river follows the contours of the earth, your choices must follow the contours of what matters most deeply to you. I have watched too many seekers lose themselves in spiritual bypassing, using the language of flow to avoid the necessary friction of standing for something. True water finds its level not by abandoning all resistance, but by following the path of authentic least resistance, the route that honors both its nature and its destination. Take a moment now to feel into your own riverbed. What values have been carved so deeply into your being that no amount of external pressure could alter their course? Is it compassion? Truth? Beauty? Service? The protection of what is vulnerable? These are not concepts to be debated, but lived realities to be honored. Your commitment to them is what transforms spiritual practice from self-improvement into authentic way-being. Your second fidelity is to the flow itself, to the daily practices that keep your inner waters moving and clear. But here I must offer a gentle warning: the ego loves to turn practices into performances, to measure spiritual progress like climbing a ladder. This is not the way of water. Your commitment is not to perfection, but to presence. Not to dramatic transformation, but to subtle persistence. I think of the ancient Chinese saying, "The river that survives is not the one that rages in spring flood, but the one that finds a way to flow even in drought." Your practices must be sustainable across the seasons of your life. Better to breathe consciously for 2 minutes every day for a year than to attempt hour-long meditations that you abandon after a week. Create what I call your daily trickle, the absolute minimum practice that you can maintain even on your most challenging days. Perhaps it is simply placing your hand on your heart and taking 3 conscious breaths. Perhaps it is pausing before you open your laptop to set an intention for how you want to move through your work. Perhaps it is drinking your morning tea with the same attention you would give to a sacred ceremony. From this minimum flows everything else. On days when life provides more spaciousness, your practice can expand like a river in spring. On days when circumstances demand everything you have, you return to the trickle, trusting that even the smallest flow prevents stagnation. Your third fidelity is to your margins, the boundaries and relationships that protect your inner ecology from pollution and depletion. Water without banks becomes a swamp, banks without water become a dead channel. The wisdom lies in the dynamic relationship between flow and form, between freedom and structure. I invite you now to craft what I call your personal riverbed manifesto, a single page that articulates the limits that sustain your flow and protect it from contamination. This is not a rigid rule book, but a living document that evolves as you do. It might include boundaries around your time, your energy, your attention, your emotional availability. It might name the people, places, and practices that nourish your deepest waters, as well as those that muddy them. But a manifesto without community is like a song without listeners, technically complete but missing its fullest expression. The Tao flows through all things, connecting them in an invisible web of interdependence. Your practice, no matter how personal, is never purely private. The clarity you cultivate, the peace you embody, the skillful responses you choose, all of these ripple outward, touching lives in ways you may never know. I have learned that true water does not hoard itself. When a spring becomes abundant, it naturally overflows, nourishing whatever lies in its path. This is not a burden or an obligation, but the natural expression of health. As your inner waters clear and deepen, you will find yourself naturally drawn to serve, not from duty or guilt, but from the simple overflow of what you have received. Perhaps this service takes the form of bringing more presence to your relationships, listening with the spacious attention you have cultivated in solitude. Perhaps it means applying Wu Wei principles in your work, creating environments where others can flourish without force or manipulation. Perhaps it involves caring for the literal waters of your bioregion, recognizing that inner and outer ecology are inseparable. The form matters less than the authenticity. Trust the Tao to guide you toward the service that emerges naturally from your unique gifts and circumstances. Like water finding the cracks where new life can take root, you will discover the places where your particular flowing is most needed. As we near the end of our time together, I want to share one final practice, a way of maintaining connection to these teachings that honors the cyclical nature of growth. Every 3 months, as the seasons turn, I invite you to undertake what I call a water day retreat. This is not an escape from life, but a deeper dive into it. Choose a day when you can be near actual water, a river, lake, ocean, or even a fountain in a city park. Arrive with no agenda beyond presence. Sit with the water for at least an hour, observing its movement, its sound, its interaction with light and wind and earth. Let this natural teacher remind you of lessons that words alone cannot convey. During this retreat, review your 3 fidelities. How has your riverbed shifted or deepened? Which practices are serving your flow, and which have become obstacles? What new boundaries are needed to protect your emerging waters? Like a river adjusting its course around new obstacles or seasonal changes, allow your practice to evolve organically. End your retreat by writing a letter to yourself, not goals or resolutions, but a gentle reminder of what you have learned and how you want to honor it. Place this letter where you will find it 3 months later, a message from your deeper waters to your surface concerns. Now, as we prepare to part ways, I invite you to close your eyes and join me in one final breath together. Feel your feet connected to the earth, your crown open to the sky, your breath flowing like a gentle tide. This is not the end of your practice, but its true beginning. Everything you need to continue flowing is already within you, not as something you must acquire, but as something you have never stopped being. In the ancient texts, it is written that the Tao that can be spoken is not the true Tao. What I have shared with you in these pages are merely fingers pointing at the moon of your own awakening. The real teaching happens in the spaces between words, in the pause between breaths, in the stillness at the center of your flowing. Remember, you are not learning to be like water. You are remembering that you already are water, temporarily taking the form of human experience, but never separate from the source that flows through all things. Trust this flow. Follow its guidance. Let it shape you even as you give it form. The path continues, my friend, with each conscious breath, each mindful step, each choice to flow rather than force. May your waters run clear, your currents run true, and your flowing serve the greater flowing of which we are all part. Reflection questions. What aspect of your life feels most ready for deeper integration of these water-like qualities? How has your understanding of strength and gentleness evolved through this journey? What would change in your daily existence if you truly trusted the wisdom of your own natural flow? Practice. Create your personal riverbed manifesto. Write one page describing the values, boundaries, and commitments that will guide your continued flowing. Include your daily trickle practice and schedule your first quarterly water day retreat.